Protected Area Network. National Initiative. 15.1 Protected Areas PAR. The adoption of a national policy for wildlife conservation in 1970 and the enactment of the Wildlife Project Act in 1972 lead to a significant growth in the protected areas network, from 5 national parks and 60 sanctuaries to a network of 669 protected areas with geographical area of the country, 4.92%. The network was further strengthened by a number of national conservation projects, notably Project Tiger, Project Elephant, Crocodile Breeding and Management Project, etc. 15.2 Wildlife Sanctuary, WLS. The Wildlife Protection Act of 1972 provided for the declaration of certain areas by the state government as wildlife sanctuaries if the area was thought to be of adequate ecological, geomorphological, and natural significance. National Park, NP. The Wildlife Protection Act, WPA, of 1972 provided for the declaration of national parks by the state government in addition to the declaration of wildlife sanctuaries. National parks are declared in areas that are considered to be of adequate ecological, geomorphological, and natural significance, although within the law, the difference in conservation value of a national park from that of a sanctuary is not specified in the WPA 1972. Difference between the two. National parks enjoy a greater degree of protection than sanctuaries. Certain activities which are regulated in sanctuaries, such as grazing of livestock, are prohibited in national parks. Wildlife sanctuary can be created for a particular species, for e.g. grizzled giant squirrel W.L.S. in Shrivelipudo, whereas the national park is not primarily focused on a particular species. The central government may also declare wildlife sanctuary and national park under certain conditions. 15.2.1 General provision for sanctuary and national park. Declaration of the protected area by the state government. Initial notification. The state government may, by notification, declare its intention to constitute any area within or outside any reserve forest as a sanctuary and national park if it considers that such area is of adequate ecological, faunal, floral, geomorphological, natural, or zoological significance for the purpose of protecting, propagating, or developing wildlife or its environment. Final notification. After the initial notification has been issued and the period for preferring claims has elapsed, the state government may issue a notification specifying the limits of the area which shall be comprised within the sanctuary and declare that the said area shall be a sanctuary and national park from such date as may be specified in the notification. Do you know? Spiders can't chew or swallow inject their prey with poison using their fangs. The poison turns the insides of insect to a watery goop and the spider just sucks it up. Declared by the central government. The central government may, if it is satisfied that an area is of adequate ecological, faunal, floral, geomorph. 176. Shankar IAS Academy Environment. For logical, natural or zoological significance, for the purpose of protecting, propagating or developing wildlife, or its environment, declared a sanctuary and national park by notification. Boundaries. The notification shall specify, as nearly as possible, the situation and limits of such area. In cases where territorial waters is included, the limits shall be determined in consultation with the chief naval hydrographer of the central government, after taking adequate measures to protect the occupational interests of the local fishermen. No alteration of boundaries of a sanctuary, a national park, shall be made except on recommendation of the National Board for Wildlife. The Amendment Act of 1991 provided for the inclusion of territorial waters in areas to be declared as sanctuaries for the protection of offshore marine flora and fauna. Settlement of rights. The state government shall make alternative arrangements required for making available fuel, fodder, and other forest produce to the persons affected, in terms of their rights as per the government records. The state government appoints an officer as a collector under the Act to inquire into and determine the existence, nature, and extent of rights of any person in or over the land comprised within the sanctuary, a national park, which is to be notified. After the issue of a notification for declaration of the protected area, no right shall be acquired in, on or over the land comprised within the limits of the area specified in such notification, except by succession, testamente, or intestate. Do you know? The term crocodilians refers to members of 3 families: the family Crocodilidae, crocodiles; family Alligatoridae, alligators and caimans; and family Garvialidae, Igarial. The term crocodiles refers only to crocodiles. Claim of rights. In the case of a claim to a right in or over any land referred to, the collector shall pass an order admitting or rejecting the same in whole or in part. If such claim is admitted in whole or in part, the collector may either A. Exclude such land from the limits of the proposed sanctuary, or B. Proceed to acquire such land or rights, except where by an agreement between the owner of such land or holder of rights and the government, the owner or holder of such rights has agreed to surrender his rights to the government in or over such land, and on payment of such compensation, as is provided in the Land Acquisition Act, 1894. C. Allow, in consultation with the Chief Wildlife Warden, the continuation of any right of any person in or over any land within the limits of the sanctuary. Entry into the protected area. No person other than 1. A public servant on duty. 2. A person who has been permitted by the Chief Wildlife Warden or the authorized officer to reside within the limits of the sanctuary and national park. 3. A person who has any right over immovable property within the limits of the sanctuary and national park. 4. A person passing through the sanctuary and national park along a public highway. 5. The dependents of the person referred to in clause A, B, or C above shall enter or reside in the sanctuary and national park, except under and in accordance with the conditions of a permit granted. Grant of permit for entry. The Chief Wildlife Warden may, on application, grant to any person a permit to enter or reside in a sanctuary and national park for all or any of the following purposes: investigation or study of wildlife and purposes ancillary or incidental thereto; photography; scientific research; tourism; Transaction of lawful business with any person residing in the sanctuary. The Chief Wildlife Warden shall be the authority who shall control, manage, and maintain all protected areas. The National Board for Wildlife may make recommendations on the setting up of and management of national parks, sanctuaries, and other protected areas. And 176. Shankar IAS. All rights reserved. On matters relating to restriction of activities in those areas, the State Board for Wildlife shall advise the state government on the selection and management of areas to be declared as protected areas. Do you know? The extinct rhinos were also more widespread, occurring in North America and Europe in addition to Africa and Asia. In the past, rhinos were not confined to the tropics, but extended into temperate and even Arctic regions. 15.3. Conservation Reserve and Community Reserves. Conservation Reserve and Community Reserves are the outcome of amendments to the Wildlife Protection Act in 2003. It provided for a mechanism to provide recognition and legal backing to the community-initiated efforts in wildlife protection. It provides for a flexible system wherein the wildlife conservation is achieved without compromising the community needs. 15.3.1. Conservation Reserves. The Amendment Act of 2003 provided for the creation of a new type of protected area called a conservation reserve. It is an area owned by the state government adjacent to national parks and sanctuaries for protecting the landscape, seascape, and habitat of fauna and flora. It is managed through a Conservation Reserve Management Committee. The state government may, after having consultations with the local communities, declare any area owned by the government as conservation reserve. Tirupati Conservation Reserve in Tirunelveli, Tamil Nadu, is the first conservation reserve established in the country. It is an effort of the village community to protect the birds nesting in their village and acted for declaration of conservation reserve. 15.3.2. Community Reserve. The Amendment Act of 2003 provided for the creation of a new type of protected area called a community reserve. The state government may notify any community land or private land as a community reserve, provided that the members of that community or individuals concerned are agreeable to offer such areas for protecting the fauna and flora, as well as their traditions, cultures, and practices. The declaration of such an area is aimed at improving the socio-economic conditions of the people living in such areas, as well as conserving wildlife. The reserve is managed through a Community Reserve Management Committee. The state government may, where the community or an individual has volunteered to conserve wildlife and its habitat, declare the area by notification as community reserve. No change in land use pattern shall be made within the community reserve, except in accordance with a resolution passed by the Management Committee and AP Proval of the same by the state government. 15.4. Coastal Protected Areas. It aims to protect and conserve the natural marine ecosystems in their pristine condition. Marine Protected Area, MPA, as any area of intertidal or subtidal terrain, together with its overlaying water and associated flora, fauna, historical and cultural features, which has been reserved by law or other effective means to protect part or all of the enclosed environment IUCN. Marine productivity in India is concentrated in small areas of coral reefs, lagoons, mangroves, estuaries and seagrass beds around the coast, which provides rich feeding and breeding ground for fish and other marine life. MPA protects the vital life support processes of the sea and also ensures sustainable productivity and fish production. The MPAs in marine environment in India are primarily classified into following three categories. Category I, this covers national parks and sanctuaries and having entire areas in intertidal, subtidal, or mangroves, coral reefs, creeks, seagrass beds, algal beds, estuaries, lagoons. Category II, this includes islands, which have major parts in marine ecosystem and some part in terrestrial ecosystem. Category IIA, this includes sandy beaches beyond intertidal line, but occasionally interacting with the seawater. 178. All rights reserved. Category IIB, this includes evergreen or semi-evergreen forests of islands. The Marine Protected Areas, MPAs, in India comprise of 33 national parks and wildlife sanctuaries designated under the Wildlife Protection Act, 1972, encompassing a few of the country's richest coastal habitats. Marine National Park and Marine Sanctuary in the Gulf of Kutch form one unit, 1 MPA. Similarly, Bhitar-Konica National Park and Bhitar-Konica Sanctuary are an integral part of 1 MPA. Thus, there are a total of 31 MPAs in India. MPAs cover less than 4.01% of the total area of all protected areas of India. Do you know? The United Nations General Assembly, UNGA, declared 2010 to 2020 as the United Nations Decade for Deserts and the Fight Against Desertification to raise awareness about desertification, land degradation and drought. 15.5. Sacred Groves of India. Sacred groves comprise of patches of forests or natural vegetation, from a few trees to forests of several acres, that are usually dedicated to local folk deities. These spaces are protected by local communities because of their religious beliefs and traditional rituals that run through several generations. The degree of sanctity of the sacred forests varies from one grove to another. In some forests, even the dry foli age and fallen fruits are not touched. People believe that any kind of disturbance will offend the local deity, causing diseases, natural calamities, or failure of crops. For example, the Garo and the Khasa tribes of northeastern India completely prohibit any human interference in the sacred groves. In other groves, dead wood or dried leaves may be picked up, but the live tree or its branches are never cut. For example, the Gonds of central India prohibit the cutting of a tree, but allow fallen parts to be used. 15.5.1 Classification of sacred groves. Traditional sacred groves, it is the place where the village deity resides, who is represented by an elementary symbol. Temple groves, here a grove is created around a temple and conserved. Groves around the burial or cremation grounds. 15.5.2 Ecological significance. Conservation of biodiversity. The sacred groves are important repositories of floral and faunal diversity that have been conserved by local communities in a sustainable manner. They are often the last refuge of endemic species in the geographical region. Recharge of aquifers. The groves are often associated with ponds, streams or springs, which help meet the water requirements of the local people. The vegetative cover also helps in the recharging the aquifers. Soil conservation. The vegetation cover of the sacred groves improves the soil stability of the area and also prevents soil erosion. 15.5.3 Distribution of sacred groves in India. In India, sacred groves are found all over the country and abundantly along the Western Ghats in the states of Kerala and Karnataka. 15.5.4 Threats to the sacred groves. The threats vary from one region to the other and even from one grove to the other. But the common threats identified are disappearance of the traditional belief systems, which were fundamental to the concept of sacred groves. These systems and their rituals are now considered mere superstition. Sacred groves in many parts of our country have been destroyed due to rapid urbanization and developmental interventions such as roads, railways tracks, dams including commercial forestry. Encroachment has led to the shrinkage of some of the largest groves in the country. Many groves are suffering due to Sanskritization, or the transformation of the primitive forms of nature worship into formal temple worship. Invasion by exotic weeds such as Eupatorium odoratum, Lantana camara, and Prosopis juliflora is a serious threat to some groves. Pressures due to increasing livestock and fuelwood collection. 179. All rights reserved. 15.6 Export prohibited goods. The prohibited items are not permitted to be exported. An export license will not be given in the normal course for goods in the prohibited category. The following are the items prohibited in the flora and fauna category. All wild animals, animal articles including their products and derivatives, excluding those for which ownership certificates have been granted and also those required for transactions for education, scientific research and management under Wildlife for Protection, Act 1972 including their parts and products. Beef of cows, oxen and calf. Beef in the form of offal of cows, oxen and calf. Meat of buffalo, both male and female, fresh and chilled and frozen. Peacock tail feathers and its handicrafts and articles. Shavings and manufactured articles of shavings of shed antlers of kaital and samba. Seashells. Wood and wood products. Fuel wood. Wood charcoal. Sandalwood in any form, but excluding finished handicraft products of sandalwood, machine finished sandalwood products, sandalwood oil. Red sanders wood, value added products of red sanders. Mechanical, chemical and semi-chemical wood pulp. Do you know? The Marble Palace Zoo in Calcutta City, which was established in the year 1854, is the oldest existing zoo in the country. Delhi has the largest fleet of buses operating on compressed natural gas, which is a successful example of low-carbon sustainable transport. India maintains and reports ozone-depleting substance, ODS, data on year-to-year basis. Nesting sites of an amphibious snake is reported from the shores of North Andaman Islands. Traditional wetland agriculture, locally known as Pokli in Kerala and Gazhani in Karnataka. Global Initiative. 15.7 The Man and Biosphere, MAB. The Man and the Biosphere, MAB, program is an intergovernmental scientific program aiming to set a scientific basis for the improvement of the relationships between people and their environment globally. Launched in the early 1970s, it proposes an interdisciplinary research agenda and capacity building that target the ecological, social and economic dimensions of biodiversity loss and the reduction of this loss. Concerned with problems at the interface of scientific, environmental, societal and development issues, MAB combines natural and social sciences, economics and education to improve human livelihoods and safeguard natural ecosystems, thus promoting innovative approaches to economic development that is socially and culturally appropriate and environmentally sustainable. The agenda of the MAB program is defined by its main governing body, the International Coordinating Council, in consultation with the broader MAB community. For implementation of its interdisciplinary work on ground, MAB relies on the World Network of Biosphere Reserves and on thematic networks and partnerships for knowledge sharing, research and monitoring, education and training, and participatory decision-making. It predicts the consequences of today's actions on Toma Rose world and thereby increases people's ability to efficiently manage natural resources for the well-being of both human populations and the environment. Do you know? Paints and dressings do not help to cure the tree wound, some actually speed up the decay. The death of one 70-year-old tree would return over 3 tons of carbon to the atmosphere. Do cut. The cottonwood tree seed is the seed that stays in flight the longest. Aloe vera is also called as fountain of youth. During periods of increased or decreased temperature, cracks may develop in the tree trunk referred to as frost cracks and sun cracks. Both can lead to decay. 180. Shankar IA. All rights reserved. 15.8 Biosphere Reserve, BR. The International Coordinating Council, ICC, of UNESCO, November 1971, introduced the designation Biosphere Reserve for natural areas. The concept of biosphere reserves was refined by a task force of UNESCO's MAB program in 1974, and BR Network was formally launched in 1976. 15.8.1 Definition. Biosphere Reserve, BR, is an international designation by UNESCO for representative parts of natural and cultural landscapes extending over large area of terrestrial or coastal marine ecosystems, or a combination thereof. BRs are special environments for both people and the nature, and are living examples of how human beings and nature can coexist while respecting each other's needs. Biosphere reserves are sites established by countries and recognized under UNESCO's Man and the Biosphere, MAB, program to promote sustainable development based on local community efforts and sound science. As places that seek to reconcile conservation of biology, and cultural diversity and economic and social development through partnerships between people and nature, they are ideal to test and demonstrate innovative approaches to sustainable development from local to international scales. Do you know? The forests in the country have been classified into 16 major types and 251 subtypes on the basis of climatic and edaphic features. Slender loris primate, found only in the tropical rainforests of southern India and Sri Lanka. The Indian star tortoise found in scrub forests of India and Sri Lanka. 15.8.3 Characteristics of Biosphere Reserve. The characteristic features of biosphere reserves are 1. Each biosphere reserves are protected areas of land and or coastal environments wherein people are an integral component of the system. Together, they constitute a worldwide network linked by international understanding for exchange of scientific information. 2. The network of BRs includes significant examples of biomes throughout the world. 3. Each BR includes one or more of the following categories. BRs are representative examples of natural biomes. 2. BRs can serve unique communities of biodiversity or areas with unusual natural features of exceptional interest. 3. BRs have examples of harmonious landscapes resulting from traditional patterns of land use. 4. BRs have examples of modified or degraded ecosystems capable of being restored to more natural conditions. BRs generally have a non-manipulative core area, in combination with areas in which baseline measurements, experimental and manipulative research, education, and training is carried out. Where these areas are not contiguous, they can be associated in a cluster. 15.8.4 Functions of biosphere reserves. Conservation to ensure the conservation of landscapes, ecosystems, species and genetic variations. To encourage the traditional resource use systems, to understand the patterns and processes of functioning of ecosystems, to monitor the natural and human-caused changes on spatial and temporal scales. Development to promote, at the local level, economic development which is culturally, socially and ecologically sustainable. To develop the strategies leading to improvement and management of natural resources. Logistics support. To provide support for research, monitoring, education and information exchange related to local, national and global issues of conservation and development. Sharing of knowledge generated by research through site-specific training and education, and development of community spirit in the management of natural resources. 181. Shankar IAS Academy Environment. All rights reserved. No part of this material may be reproduced in any form or by any means without permission in writing. Beneficiaries. Direct beneficiaries, local people, and the ecological resources of the biosphere reserves. Indirect beneficiaries, world community. Biosphere reserves, an Indian approach. It is this ecological diversity that makes India as one of the megadiversity regions on the globe. Efforts are on to designate at least one biosphere reserve in each of the biogeographic provinces. 15.8.5 National Biosphere Reserve Program. The National Biosphere Reserve Program was initiated in 1986 to ensure participation of local inhabitants for effective management and devise means of improving livelihood of the local inhabitants through sustainable use. Objectives. It may be noted that BRs are not a substitute or alternative, but a reinforcement to the existing protected areas. The objectives of the Biosphere Reserve Program, as envisaged by the core group of experts, are as follows. To conserve the diversity and integrity of plants and animals within natural ecosystems. To safeguard genetic diversity of species on which their continuing evolution depends. To provide areas for multifaceted research and monitoring. To provide facilities for education and training, and to ensure sustainable use of natural resources through most appropriate technology for improvement of economic well-being of the local people. These objectives should be oriented in such a way that the BRs are the units wherein the biological, socio-economic, and cultural dimension of conservation are integrated together into a realistic conservation strategy. 15.8.6 Criteria for selection of BRs. The criteria for selection of sites for BRs, as laid down by the core group of experts in 1979, are listed below. Primary criteria. A site that must contain an effectively protected and minimally disturbed core area of value of nature conservation, and should include additional land and water suitable for research and demonstration of sustainable methods of research and management. The core area should be typical of a biogeographical unit and large enough to sustain viable populations representing all tropic levels in the ecosystem. Do you know? Frogs are found all over the world and in every CLI mate, except Antarctica. Frogs cannot live in the sea or any salt water. Secondary criteria. Areas having rare and endangered species. Areas having diversity of soil and microclimatic conditions and indigenous varieties of biota. Areas potential for preservation of traditional tribal or rural modes of living for harmonious use of environment. 15.8.7 Structure and design of biosphere reserves. In order to undertake complementary activities of biodiversity conservation and development of sustainable management aspects, biosphere reserves are demarcated into 3 interrelated zones. 1. The core zone. Core zone. Buffer zone. Transition zone. The core zone should be kept absolutely undisturbed. It must contain suitable habitat for numerous plant and animal species, including higher order predators, and may contain centers of endemism. A core zone secures legal protection and management and research activities ties that do not affect natural processes, and wildlife are allowed. Strict nature reserves and wilderness portions of the area are designated as core areas of brother. The core zone is to be kept free from all human pressures external to the system. 182. Shankar. All rights reserved. 2. The buffer zone. Buffer zone adjoins or surrounds core zone. Its uses and activities are managed in ways that protect the core zone. These uses and activities include restoration, demonstration sites for enhancing value addition to the resources, limited recreation, tourism, fishing and grazing, which are permitted to reduce its effect on core zone. Research and educational activities are to be encouraged. Human activities, if natural within BR, are likely to be permitted to continue if these do not adversely affect the ecological diversity. 3. The transition zone. The transition zone is the outermost part of a biosphere reserve. This is usually not delimited one, and is a zone of cooperation where conservation, knowledge and management skills are applied and uses are managed in harmony with the purpose of the biosphere reserve. This includes settlements, croplands, managed forests, an area for intensive recreation, and other economic uses characteristic of the region. In buffer zone and the transition zones, manipulative macro-management practices are used. Experimental research areas are used for understanding the patterns and processes in the ecosystem. Modified or degraded landscapes are included as rehabilitation areas to restore the ecology in a way that it returns to sustainable productivity. 15.8.8 How biosphere reserves are different from protected areas. BR is not intended to replace existing protected areas, but it widens the scope of conventional approach of protection and further strengthens the protected area network. Existing legally protected areas, national parks, wildlife sanctuary, tiger reserve and reserve of protected forests may become part of the BR without any change in their legal status. On the other hand, inclusion of such areas in a BR will enhance their national value. Do you know? Dead and decaying trees on the ground replenish soils by returning important nutrients and provide food resources for many types of wildlife. However, the biosphere reserves differ from protected areas due to their emphasis on conservation of overall biodiversity and landscape, rather than some specific flagship species, to allow natural and evolutionary processes to continue without any hindrance. 2. Different components of BRs like landscapes, habitats, and species and land races. 3. Developmental activities and resolution and mitigation of conflicts between development and conservation. 4. Increase in broad basing of stakeholders, especially local people's participation and their training, compared to the features of scheme on wildlife sanctuaries and national parks. V. Sustainable environment-friendly development and sustained coordination amongst different development organizations and agencies. 6. Research and monitoring to understand the structure and functioning of ecological system and their mode of reaction when exposed to human intervention. The Indian National Man and Biosphere Committee constituted by the Central Gov identifies new sites, advises on policies and programs, lays down guidelines, reviews progress and guidelines in the light of evaluation studies and feedback. The management of biosphere reserves is the responsibility of the concerned state EUT with necessary financial assistance, guidelines for management and technical expertise provided by the central government. BR are internationally recognized within the framework of UNESCO's Man and Biosphere MAB program after receiving consent of the participating country. Do you know? The United Nations General Assembly, UNGA, declared 2011 to 2020 as the United Nations Decade on Biodiversity and United Nations Decade for Deserts and the Fight Against Desertification. 15.9 World Network of Biosphere Reserves, WNBR. 15.9.1 The World Network. In order to facilitate cooperation, BRs are admitted into international network by international coordinate. 183. Shankar IAS Academy Environment. All rights reserved. No part of this material may be reproduced in any form or by any means without permission in writing. In Council, ICC, of the Man and Biosphere MAB program of UNESCO on the request of the participating country subject to their fulfillment of prescribed criteria. The BRs remain under the sole sovereignty of the concerned country estate where it is situated, and participation in World Network is voluntary. Delisting from international network is done as an exception on ground of violation of obligation for conservation and sustainable development of biosphere reserves after consulting the concerned government. The MAB program's primary achievement is the creation in 1977 of the World Network of Biosphere Reserves. Composed of 610 biosphere reserves in 117 countries, including 12 transboundary sites, the WNBR of the MAB program promotes North-South and South-South collaboration and represents a unique tool for international cooperation through sharing knowledge, exchanging experiences, building capacity and promoting best practices. 15.10 Biodiversity Hotspots. Biodiversity hotspot concept was put forth by Norman Myers in 1988 to qualify as a hotspot. A region must meet two strict criteria. A. Species endemism. It must contain at least 1,500 species of vascular plants for greater than 0.5% of the world's total as endemics. And B. Degree of threat. It has to have lost at least 70% of its original habitat. Each biodiversity hotspot represents a remarkable universe of extraordinary floral and faunal endemic it is struggling to survive in rapidly shrinking ecosystems. Over 50% of the world's plant species and 42% of all terrestrial vertebrate species are endemic to the 35 biodiversity hotspots. 15.10.1 The hottest hotspots. Some hotspots are much richer than others in terms of their numbers of endemics. 5 key factors have been taken into consideration, and those biodiversity hotspot tops the list with respect to these 5 factors are considered as hottest hotspots. Factors 1. Endemic plants 2. Endemic vertebrates 3. Endemic plants for area ratio, species per 100 square kilometers 4. Endemic vertebrates for area ratio, species per 100 square kilometers 5. Remaining primary vegetation as percent of original extent. The 8 hottest hotspots in terms of 5 factors. 1. Madagascar 2. Philippines 3. Sunderland 4. Brazil's Atlantic Forest 5. Caribbean 6. Indo-Burma 7. Western Ghats of Sri Lanka 8. Eastern Arc and coastal forests of Tanzania are Kenya. These 8 hottest hotspots appear at least 3 times in the top 10 listings for each factor. Do you know? All snakes and lizards have 2 penises. 15.10.2 Indian biodiversity hotspots. There are 4 biodiversity hotspots present in India. They are 1. The Himalayas 2. Indo-Burma and 3. The Western Ghats and Sri Lanka 4. Sunderland. Do you know? Spider silk, it looks like one thread, but it is actually many thin threads that stick together. As soon as this liquid silk hits the air, it hardens. All spiders have fangs. Their poison is strong enough to kill their prey. Few spiders with poison strong enough to cause pain or even some nerve damage in humans. Spiders have 48 knees. Yep, count them, 8 legs with 6 joints on each. Spiders' legs are covered with many hairs. The hairs pick up vibrations and smells from the air. 184. All rights reserved. 1. The Eastern Himalayas hotspot. About the region. The Eastern Himalayas is the region encompassing Bhutan, northeastern India, and southern, central, and eastern Nepal. The region is geologically young and shows high altitudinal variation. The abrupt rise of the Himalayan mountains from less than 500 meters to more than 8,000 meters results in a diversity of ecosystems that range from alluvial grasslands and subtropical broadleaf forests along the foothills to temperate broadleaf forests in the midhills, mixed conifer and conifer forests in the higher hills, and alpine meadows above the tree line. 2. Indo-Burma. Region. The Indo-Burma region encompasses several countries. It is spread out from eastern Bangladesh to Malaysia and includes northeastern India south of Brahmaputra River, Myanmar, the southern part of China's Yunnan province, Lao People's Democratic Republic, Cambodia, Vietnam and Thailand. 3. Western Ghats and Sri Lanka. Western Ghats, also known as the Sahyadri Hills, encompasses the mountain forests in the southwestern parts of India and highlands of southwestern Sri Lanka. The entire extent of hotspot was originally about 182,500 square kms, but due to tremendous population pressure, now only 12,445 square kilometers, or 6.8% is in pristine condition. The wide variation of rainfall patterns in the Western Ghats, coupled with the region's complex geography, produces a great variety of vegetation types. These include scrub forests in the low-lying rain-shadow areas and the plains, deciduous and tropical rime forests up to about 1,500 meters, and a unique mosaic of montane forests and rolling grasslands above 1,500 meters. In Sri Lanka, diversity includes dry evergreen forests to dipterocarpus-dominated rime forests to tropical montane cloud forest. 15.11 Biodiversity cold spots. Areas that have relatively low biological diversity, but are also experiencing a high rate of habitat loss. Although a biodiversity cold spot is low in species richness, it can also be important to conserve, as it may be the only location where a rare species is found. Extreme. Physical environments, low or high temperatures or pressures, or unusual chemical composition, inhabited by just one or two specially adapted species are cold spots that warrant conservation because they represent unique environments that are biologically and physically interesting. 15.12 World Heritage Sites. World Heritage Sites means sites any of various areas or objects inscribed on the United Nations Educational, Scientific, and Cultural Organization, UNESCO, World Heritage List. The sites are designated as having outstanding universal value under the Convention concerning the protection of the world cultural and natural heritage. This convention, which was adopted by the UNESCO in 1972 and enforced in 1975, provides a framework for international cooperation in preserving and protecting cultural treasures and natural areas throughout the world. The convention defines the kind of sites which can be considered for inscription of the World Heritage List and scient monuments, museums, biodiversity and geological heritage, etc., and sets out the duties of the state parties in identifying potential sites and their role in protecting them. Although many World Heritage Sites fall into either the cultural or natural categories, a particularly important aspect of the convention is its ability to recognize landscapes that combine these values, and whether biological and physical aspects of landscape have evolved alongside human activity. The first list of World Heritage State was published in 1978. The World Heritage Convention reiterates that the protection on sites should be dovetailed with regional planning programs. This is not happening always. Agra city developments do not go well. The conversation of Taj Mahal is a point. Natural heritage sites are restricted to those natural areas that 1. Furnish outstanding examples of the Earth's record of life or its geologic processes. 2. Provide excellent examples of ongoing ecological and biological evolutionary processes. 3. Contain natural phenomena that are rare, unique, superlative, or of outstanding beauty. Or 4. Furnish habitats or rare endangered animals or plants, or are sites of exceptional biodiversity. 185. All rights reserved. Until the end of 2004, there were 6 criteria for cultural heritage and 4 criteria for natural heritage. In 2005, this was modified so that there's only one set of 10 criteria. Nominated sites must be of outstanding universal value and meet at least one of the 10 criteria. The criteria are given below. 15.11.1 Criteria. I. To represent a masterpiece of human creative genius. 2. To exhibit an important interchange of human values over a span of time or within a cultural area of the world on developments in architecture or technology, monumental arts, town planning or landscape design. 3. To bear unique or at least exceptional testimony to a cultural tradition or to a civilization which is living or which has disappeared. 4. To be an outstanding example of a type of building, architectural or technological ensemble or landscape which illustrates a significant stages in human history. V. To be an outstanding example of a traditional human settlement, land use, or sea use, which is representative of a culture, or cultures, or human interaction with the environment, especially when it has become vulnerable under the impact of irreversible change. 6. To be directly or tangibly associated with events or living traditions, with ideas, or with beliefs, with artistic and literary works of outstanding universal significance. The committee considers that this criterion should preferably be used in conjunction with other criteria. 7. To contain superlative natural phenomena or areas of exceptional natural beauty and aesthetic importance. 8. To be outstanding examples representing major stages of Earth's history, including the record of life, signify cant ongoing geological processes in the development of landforms, or significant geomorphic or physiographic features. 9. To be outstanding examples representing significant ongoing ecological and biological processes in the evolution and development of terrestrial, freshwater, coastal and marine ecosystem and communities of plants and animals. X. To contain the most important and significant natural habitats for insists conservation of biological diversity, including those containing threatened species of outstanding universal value from the point of view of science or conservation. The UNESCO funds numerous efforts to preserve and restore World Heritage Sites in developing nations. It maintains also a list of World Heritage Sites in developing nations. It maintains also a list of World Heritage in danger facing threat of pollution and other natural hazards. Sites subject to unusual levels of pollution, natural hazards, or other problems may be placed for restoration. Such designated sites facilitate promotion of tourism. International Year of Biodiversity. The United Nations declared 2010 to be the International Year of Biodiversity. It is a celebration of life on Earth and of the value of biodiversity for our lives. Do you know? There is no parrot in India. They are parakeets. International Day for Biological Diversity, the 22nd of May. The United Nations proclaimed May 22nd as the International Day for Biological Diversity, IDB, to increase UN understanding and awareness of biodiversity issues. Initially the 29th of December, the date of entry into force of the Convention of Biological Diversity, was designated the International Day for Biological Diversity by the UN General Assembly in late 1993. In December 2000, the UN General Assembly adopted the 22nd of May as IDB, to commemorate the adoption of the text of the Convention on the 22nd of May, 1992, by the Nairobi Final Act of the Conference for the adoption of the agreed text of the Convention on Biological Diversity. Do you know? Gymnosperms produce their seeds on the surface or tips of an appendage such as a pine cone. Angiosperms produce their seeds inside a fruit such as an acorn. Dendrochronology is the science of calculating a tree's age by its rings. For every 5% of tree cover added to a community, stormwater runoff is reduced by approximately 2%. Heat islands, created by tree loss, also exponentially increase air pollutants. Aspirin is derived from the bark of a willow tree. 186. Shankar IAS Academy Environment. All rights reserved. No part of this material may be